Absolutely delighted to join you this morning, folks. It's really fantastic to see close on 600 people register for the event. I think it's reflective of the entrepreneurial appetite that's in place, notwithstanding the current macro environment. As Conor said in his opening remarks, we're here to help you to start and scale your business. As an organisation, we've been doing that for 33 years. And where we've got to today is we're number one for private funding on an annual basis, with near 20 million between angel and venture funding. In engaging with people like you who are thinking of starting a business or early in that journey, the number one question we get asked all the time is, where can I get funding? So the purpose of my piece this morning, I think, is to try and give you an overview of that funding landscape and to hopefully shed some light and make that a little bit easier for you. I'm going to start briefly by, remarking that it's my view that there are more scale-up companies in Ireland now than ever before, more serial entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of positivity about the startup landscape, more to go, of course. And in that regard, if I even reflect back briefly over the past 12 months, even during the pandemic, of companies that we've worked with over the last decade, companies like Engage EHS, Avril Copeland at Inner Strength, companies like Iconic Translations, even Learn Upon with Brendan Nowd, Decawave, Race Caller. All these companies have exited or taken serious PE money on board over the last year at valuations anywhere from 10, 15, 40 million, over 100 and even over 400. So we are definitely making significant progress. I guess the sort of lens I want to shine on that is if I look back at those companies, I ask myself the question as to how did they get funded? You'll find the majority of them were actually funded through their own money, private angel money and Enterprise Ireland. And that's the primary combination of funding that people use. A subset of companies then will use venture funding, and we will touch on that a little bit later. What I'm going to do now for the next little while is talk about the sources of funding. And there's a little bit of data here, so do bear with me. But I think you'll find that there are a lot of different sources. And we did some research in Q4 last year. And the feedback that came back very strongly from you guys in the marketplace is there's a lot of confusion about the help that's out there. Now, we have a view across the whole piece, and I hope that will come across in my remarks over the next little while. I'm going to start to talk about public funding. There are a range of public funding sources available, starting quickly with micro enterprises, and these are looked after primarily by the local enterprise offices, where you can get anything from a feasibility grant for 15k through to a priming grant, through to a business expansion grant up to 80k. Moving on from the micro enterprises in Leo, next up would be Enterprise Ireland itself, and you would start there with what we would call the New Frontiers programs. They're run in partnership with the Institutes of Technology throughout the country. There are 16 of those, and I understand that they're planning about 22, what they call Phase 1 New Frontier programs this year, and an additional maybe 12 Phase 2 programs. And that would support of the order of 500 entrepreneurs. And details of those are to be updated over the next week on the New Frontiers website, I'm informed. Moving on from New Frontiers, the next step up then for companies just that little bit further on, companies maybe with a minimum viable product, is the Enterprise Ireland Competitive Start Fund. One of those has just closed in the last few days. We will run annually the female one, a female enterprise one called Innovate. So throughout 2021, there'll be at least another 2 calls. Each of those supports about 20 companies. So in total, you're talking about 60 companies getting up to 50,000 for 10% equity in their company. Of course, the main source of public funding in Ireland is through the very excellent Enterprise Ireland HPSU scheme. On an annual basis, that typically supports 80 or 90 companies, and normally of the order of a total of 25 million, maybe about 250,000 into each company. In the last year, that number was much higher, maybe 40 plus million, with some money going back into existing HPSUs to counteract the effects of the pandemic. There's also money available through things like innovation vouchers through the colleges, and if you're doing entrepreneurship from within a college, there's various sources of funds. The final one I want to call out in a public funding perspective is European money. Some of you will be familiar. The previous system was Horizon 2020. There's a new system in place now, Horizon Europe it's called. It has been piloted over the last couple of years, and one of the companies, Septec, later has availed of it under what's known as EIC Accelerator, or European Innovation Council Accelerator. And it's really interesting because Europe is now seeking to put money directly into companies, and up to 2.5 million of grant money. And even then in a blended finance format over a number of years, the possibility of up to 15 million in equity money. It has been run as a pilot. It'll be mainstreamed later in the year, and watch this space. We're waiting on more information therein. I'm going to wrap now on that public funding piece, and maybe simply to say the commentary is, compared to other countries in Europe, actually we're in a very good position with regard to availability of public funding, but it's certainly the case that it can be a little bit confusing. So pick up the phone, contact us. We have a view across the whole piece. We will guide you as to where the correct source or sources of funding are. I'm going to move now from the public and move to the private funding. Some of the public funding needs private funding to match it. The number one source of private funding is and always has been business angel funding. Today in Ireland, that breaks into two categories. There is formal business angel funding through the HBAN Business Angel Network. We ourselves at Dublin BIC, in partnership with the Irish BICs, run that. And I'm really proud and pleased to say it has grown dramatically over the last number of years and is now on an annual basis enabling about 16 million of pure private angel money into about 60 companies on the island. Apart from that, then you have what we call the ad hoc business angel investing through people, through friends, through accountants, contacts, through family offices, etc. And that in most countries, including Ireland, is usually about 6 or 7 times the size of the formal angel market. So there could be anything like 70 or 80 million more going in through that. Other sources of funding in Ireland in the early stage include the likes of Elkstone and SOS Ventures, who will invest a couple of $100K and have the ability to follow on after. SOS is involved obviously internationally, but is active in Ireland in the early stage. That will take us on then beyond that to venture. The commentary with regard to venture capital in Ireland is a couple of fold. It has moved on dramatically. There's close on $1 billion under management overall. But we're interested here, and you guys are interested in start and scale in that early stage. And in that regard, the following are the companies that are active today. We ourselves, after a major effort, are in the market with, I suppose, the largest dedicated seed and early stage fund, the Ireland Smart Tech Fund, a 30 million technology fund. ActVenture, who have a 90 million main fund, have a sidecar 13 million early stage fund. And BVP Ventures have an EIS fund, which does a small number of investments each year. The University Fund invests in companies directly out of the universities. In more recent times, we have Sure Venture, who are investing in IoT and software companies early stage also. Then you have the Western Development Commission with an evergreen fund, which is very active in medical device, but not just in the early space. Obviously, it's geographically constrained to Western counties. And then you have the likes of the Yields Lab, which is a new vertical in AgTech, in the AgTech space. You have a number of other funds then, which are more established funds like Frontline, Delta, Finch, and Finisterre, who will do some seed, but obviously it's not their main area of focus, and some of those have an international focus as well as domestic. My commentary now on the private funding overall then is, where are we at? We're pretty good with early stage private funding. We have loads of venture out here. That place in the middle is a little bit squeezed, and it's my personal view that more needs to be done there. We ourselves made an enormous effort to bring a fund to the market because it was needed, but I believe more is needed in that middle place. I'm going to wrap now pretty shortly, but what I'd like to do before wrapping, I suppose, is just give a little maybe perspective or commentary. Where are we at in Ireland with regard to entrepreneurship and funding? We've come a long way, and that's great and to be celebrated, but the bar is getting raised higher and higher internationally all the time. So there's more for us to do. I acknowledge that the marketplace is confusing out there. So we say to you, come to us at Dublin BIC. We're here to help you. We work in close partnership with the private sector and Enterprise Ireland. And we're a public-private entity, so we're here to help you in that regard. The next point, just to finish off, would be that you have to respect the money of the people you're fundraising. So if you're fundraising, you've got to hustle, you've got to respect that money, and show that by how you prepare and show it by how you spend the money afterwards. My final thing is you should spend most of your time in value creation. If you create serious value and have something that's really properly differentiated in the market and you prepare properly, then you will succeed. What we would say to you at Dublin BIC is, we don't guarantee you funding, but we do say to you, if you come to us and join our Investor Ready programs, you will have the best chance of sourcing funding, be that from ourselves or other sources. in the marketplace. So I think without further ado, I'll maybe leave it at that and ask Conor to come back in and join us. And I hope that's been helpful to you. Thank you, folks.
Michael, thanks so much. A tremendous overview of what's going on in the market. We've got some questions coming in, so if you're okay, I might keep you for a minute or two and jump to that. So the first question I think that comes up is there enough seed funding to meet the demand in the market? And it probably goes to that piece you're talking about in the middle there. So maybe you might just talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Conor. Yes, and I'm conscious, obviously, there's a lot of information to get through. So as I say, please, for people out there, do reach back out to our team and we can have more time to go through this. Look, that's a great question. And I think the short answer is no, there isn't enough in that middle area. And we know this, directly. We have really, I suppose, made an enormous effort to bring a new seed fund to the market. And the reason we did that is, when we looked out there, there just wasn't enough funding dedicated to companies seeking to, in that middle space. There is enough in the early stage when you're getting started, be public or a little bit of private. But that middle space where you need money to really ramp it up and accelerate, you maybe have proved that you have something that's in demand, but you need money to scale it. Now, I think that's recognized here at a policy level, and there are plans afoot to try and bring more money into the market. But I would say the short answer is we need, as a nation, to remember that if we don't have enough money in that middle part, there won't be those scale-up companies to fund later. So we're doing okay, but more needs to be done in terms of early stage venture funding.
More needs to be done to build the pipeline, to build the scale-up ones. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. If I could ask you, the common perception, I suppose, is that a lot of the investment goes into the tech space and into, we hear about these tech giants and whatnot. What's happening in manufacturing sector? Are you seeing much there in terms of investment and support in specifically for manufacturing?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. And if you'd asked me that maybe a couple of years back, it would very much have been not much. An awful lot of that world moved to China, etc. But the economics of all that have changed somewhat in more recent times. And we are now starting to see products and offerings which might be industrial based or hardware based and manufacturing coming back a little bit. They still can pose some challenges. And so far, I suppose, is what's happened from an investor perspective is that the cost of setting up a software-based business is a lot less than it was. So investors therefore are naturally a little bit more attracted to that. So it's important not to, roll over. We have to acknowledge that if you're making hardware or doing something of that nature on a manufacturing base, it brings other challenges. But the answer is it's starting to come back a little bit. And even in the industrial area, we're seeing the likes of ag tech and areas like that, which might blend software and hardware together. And there's some funding available for those now that perhaps wasn't there before. So it's getting there early. Getting there.
I'll ask one more question and then we'll move to the next segment. But I'm going to ask you to stay with us, Michael, maybe just for a bit. I have a question around what makes the difference. You touched on it briefly at the end of your piece, but what makes the difference? You've been doing this for a good number of years. What's the difference between success and failure in your view?
Time flies, Conor. Yes. Indeed, yeah. Look, I spent a good bit of time traveling around the world selling embedded software and things, but then came across this early stage world and I'm hooked by it. If I had a single word with regard to why people succeed versus those that don't, it probably is resilience of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneurial journey is a tough one. It's incredibly exciting. It's incredibly a lot of ups and downs. Don't get over carried away with the ups, with the ups, and likewise with the downs. But you are going to need serious resilience. People are there to help as well. Don't be afraid to ask. People do like to help, but obviously be well prepared for it, etc. But yeah, I think it's obviously the team that goes without saying, but it's the resilience of the entrepreneur, the vision they have from the outset, staying true to that. And listening to the feedback, but being your own. Resilience, I think.
Take those opinions on board, shape them, and then do what you need to do in that tenacity piece. And I love the piece you mentioned there, but there is a lot of support available in the ecosystem. You've just got to go out, you've got to reach. And events like this, what we're trying to do is connect people so that you do go looking for those supports.
Absolutely. And obviously, look, we're in the pandemic at the moment. We're closed down. We're here in our location in space at Dublin BIC in Bright Street. People will know, of course, that we also manage the Guinness Enterprise Centre, which is located up in Dublin 8, and we've had a major project going on over the last couple of years to double the size of that, to be a phenomenal global entrepreneurial super hub. So I really look forward to holding an event in person up there with people who we're talking to in their home offices this morning. And I think it's that sort of inability to network, connect, and have startup and scale up and maybe even larger corporates all together. That's the kind of networking that can help move things along.
Fantastic, Michael. Great insights. So thank you for coming in. Stay there, and I might come back to you in a while.